Hello and welcome to today's TOC podcast. I'm Joe Weichert, co-chair of O'Reilly's Tools of Change conference. In addition to our in-person events, the TOC team has invested a great deal of time over the past few months on both podcasts and webcasts. I want to encourage you to visit the conference website, toccon.com, to keep up on all our upcoming events. Now, for today's podcast, I'm joined by Inkling founder and CEO Matt MacInnis. Matt, welcome to this TOC podcast.
Thanks, Joe.
So, Matt, how has the adoption rate of Inkling gone for you so far relative to the original projections you had?
I think we knew that this was going to be a really meaningful product in a market that really wants this kind of software. And we have been incredibly happy with the level of uptake. I think it's probably exceeded what we expected to have happen this quickly. There's as many users as we can basically handle at this point coming in, trying out content, and ultimately when they're students, especially becoming customers. So I'd say we're extremely happy with how well things have gone so far with adoption.
Oh, that's great. So, and everybody I think pretty much knows Inkling from the textbook market. Is that the marketplace you're still primarily focusing on?
Yeah, well, we're really focused on learning, and the sort of area that needs the most help is textbooks. And we have a pretty nuanced vision for the future of the textbook. We don't think that it looks anything like what the print book looks like today, and we're really working toward that long-term goal in everything that we do. But what's cool about it is that textbooks are a huge market. If you think about K-12, higher education, professional, medical, law, there's $16 billion spent on those textbooks every year, and we don't know where that number is going to head. Probably not up. But we don't think that the products that people pay for a few years from now are going to be as sort of distinct as the textbook is today from other print products. And what I mean by that is when you think about learning about cellular biology, or you think about learning about something medical in medical school, or you think about learning how to crochet or cook or travel, a lot of those products are actually going to start to look much more similar. They're going to be more modular. They're going to be more hierarchical. They're going to be more interactive. And I think that although our focus today is most certainly on the textbook and on serving undergraduate students, there's a whole world of opportunity for this kind of technology out there, and we're looking forward to tackling those things as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can see you going after just how to in general. And so even though right now you've got the focus on textbooks, it sounds like the door is wide open for other types of learning content, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's fascinating to put a textbook like an Inkling title, like the biology titles, et cetera, that we do in front of a non-student, put it in front of somebody who's older, and have them react with such delight at how cool it is and how much fun it would be for them to go back to school and learn using these kinds of things rather than learning from a printed book. So I think that there's just so much potential in this kind of content that we haven't even come close to realizing what we're going to be able to do just a year or two from now.
Hey, one of the other things I really love about Inkling is you're selling chapters individually, basically. And I've seen publishers. I was part of a publishing house that did that probably 5 or 6 years ago. I think it was ahead of its time. But with the portable devices, mobile devices, and so forth, we all have access to now. It seems like that is really going to be a viable option for the future. So, how popular has it been as an option for Inkling up to now?
Well, as a thing within Inkling, I would say it's probably, if you think about it, not in terms of dollars, but in terms of the number of units that we sell to our users, it's the large majority of the units that we transact. And what that means is that our customers come in and buy a chapter here, a chapter there, and they continue to buy the things they need for the rest of the semester if it's a textbook, and they buy just the pieces that they need, not the whole book. And I think that is also an example of something that is kind of a halfway point between what we've been doing before and what we intend to do long term. When you think about the chapter, it is a division of content that's really rooted in the structure of the book. Chapters are linear. They're numbered, right, from 1 to 17 or 1 to 50, and they don't have to. It doesn't have to be that way in the digital world. You don't have to have things be a sequential order of stuff because there's no physical spine there that you have to bind everything together with. So we actually think that as we begin to work on many of these projects that we're now working on with the publishers to build natively digital content, that you won't have a chapter, you'll actually have an object, or you'll have something that is learning outcome focused that you'll pay for as a modular bit of content. And So today, the chapter model works for everyone. They understand what a chapter is. And things in syllabi and courses tend to be assigned by the chapter. Down the road, the infrastructure we built from a technology standpoint will let us do even more powerful things, as you know, with modular content that isn't just chapter based from a printed book.
So it's interesting you mentioned students sort of picking and choosing the pieces they want. I guess I had kind of assumed that instructors would largely say, okay, these are the parts that the students should pull down. Is it a little bit of both, or is it really mostly the students?
It's driven by the professor to the extent that the professor assigns a subset of the content for his or her class. But of course, the ultimate decision maker is the student. They either want that content or they don't. And if they want it, they'll buy just the pieces they need. And so I think it's actually both. I don't think a student's going to go out and buy a bunch of chapters that haven't been assigned to him and aren't going to be on the exam, because when you're taking a full course load, you just got to focus on learning the stuff you've got to learn, and nothing more than that. So it's, today in the higher ed textbook market in particular, driven by both the professor and the student. But that may or may not be the case. Obviously, it's going to be quite different when we do this with consumers at large.
Okay, yeah, and I guess the other piece of Inkling that really gets my attention is just the whole social aspect of it, right? And it seems like you're approaching an audience that has lived with social media for all their life almost, and so if anyone that's going to be used to it, it's students, of that age. So how popular are those social features, and are you seeing them used in any unexpected ways?
Yeah, so the social stuff in the platform, we just looked at the data yesterday since we launched 2.0. And I don't know how clearly this comes through on a Skype interview, but the chart goes like this, and then it goes like that, right? And it climbs as people have begun to discover these new features within the platform. The social stuff, as you said, students have essentially lived with social media their whole lives. I think what's important to remember even beyond that is that human beings have evolved in an environment where we learned by talking to one another and by showing one another how to do things, right? I mean, humans are, in fact, the only species that learn from one another. Even chimpanzees, when you look at some of the things they do, like sticking a stick into an ant farm and having ants crawl up and then eat the ants off the stick, that trick is something that they had to teach themselves. Every generation teaches themselves that trick. They don't learn it from their parents. Human beings are wired to learn from one another, and the textbook is, in any book, honestly, is a fundamentally isolating experience, and sometimes that's good. Sometimes the novel is where you want to be. You want to be wrapped up in your novel, away from the world, as it takes you away into a fantasy land, and that's a great thing. With the textbook, it's not such a great thing to be totally isolated from the world around you. It's okay to focus. It's good to focus. It's good to read and think. But you also need to bounce ideas off people and ask questions and have people show you things you don't understand. And our goal is to bring the community of learners around you into the textbook experience, so that the content is one of the ways that you learn when you're using Inkling. And so it's a very broad vision for how people connect and communicate around content. And we think that the stuff we've got today, where you can really literally have conversations within the book with your professor or with other subject matter experts or with your peers, or act as an expert yourself if you've mastered that subject matter, is an incredibly powerful way for people to learn, and we think it's going to grow from here. This is just the very first step in integrating that kind of experience into Inkling. The word social is an empty word, obviously. So we don't call it social. We really call it conversations and communication and collaboration. They used to call it cheating, but we call it collaboration these days.
But you know what? I think that's such a powerful point here, because I think beyond textbooks, and I'm just going to think about myself now as a consumer and even projects I would do around the home. Today, there are sites I could go to for how-to content, and then there are separate sites for forums where you could ask questions.
Right.
And you rarely see the two integrated together, and that's where I think you've got so much potential even beyond the textbook here, right?
Right. And I think if you look at titles that are available on the platform today, there's a great photography book, for example, from Wiley. The photography book's not a textbook. It was one of the best-selling titles on the platform. And there are already a lot of conversations happening among existing users of that title. So we're excited about some of the trade content, as well as the textbook content that we have forthcoming, for integrating those communication sort of styles and the value add of people talking to one another in the book, in the not too distant future. And I think you're right. I think it's going to have very broad implications beyond just undergraduate learning.
Yeah, I dug up a Business Week article about you earlier this year, and you talked about this tool that you've got to quickly convert a print textbook into a digital one. So, how effective is that tool, and how much time does it save, and can it be used effectively for non-textbook content?
Right. I think the way to think about this is if you use the word tool, a hammer is a tool, and what we've built is Home Depot. A giant space full of tons and tons and tons of different kinds of tools and the patterns that you use to build digital layouts. Because the we're not here to sell a digital copy of a textbook to a student. That's not what we're in the business of doing. That's distribution. There's no intellectual property. There's no problem solving going on there other than maybe cutting the price and giving somebody a lesser product. Uh, we're in the business of reinventing publishing, and we're in the business of defining a new paradigm for how people build digital content products. So the tool set that we've built, we don't talk about it much publicly because we've got a lot more work to do on it. But we've taken what used to be a 16-week arduous process for building a handful of books at a time and cut that down to dozens and dozens of books in simultaneous production produced over the course of maybe 8 to 12 weeks, and we haven't finished yet. And I think the other beautiful thing is that the quality of what we produce, the richness and the interactivity, is increasing, all while decreasing the time it takes to build an Inkling title. So that's going to get better with time, and I think it'll be obvious as you watch our website and you look at all the new titles that are coming out how well we're doing there. We just launched our 51st title yesterday, and each of those titles is 1,000+ pages a book. Not all of them, but they're huge, and it's obvious that the scale out is happening at a pretty good clip.
And scalability is always something I'm kind of curious to hear about in models like this, because a lot of times you look at some of the more richer sort of iPad products out there, and you wonder, okay, that took X amount of hours, and will the next one take just as many? So each one is kind of a one-off. So
Right.
is there scale from that point of view? Like once a publisher puts their first title through this, are there lessons learned, and they're able to make the next one go a lot faster?
Absolutely. And that's the whole point, is that it took us that long time to build those first few titles because we learned so much about what it takes. And even completing our 50th book, we looked back and said we probably have learned 20% of the lessons that we still need to learn. And so it does get better as you go through the content. The lessons that you learn are invaluable. I think there's basically, in my mind, no question that Inkling has the single largest repository of knowledge around the challenges of true natively digital publishing of any company in the world, and we're going to continue to build that knowledge base as we grow the library. But yes, it gets shorter. Yes, you learn a lot of lessons, and it's up to you whether you apply those lessons learned to shortening the time to produce, or whether you apply those lessons to increasing the level of enhancement and quality of what you produce in a given time frame. And sometimes we'll go one way or the other with a given title.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. By the way, I love it that you've integrated Wikipedia and Google searches within the user interface.
Yeah.
And I kind of chuckled when I first saw that, because I thought, wow, the textbook publishers in particular have never been a huge fan of the Wikipedia. So I'm wondering, did you run into any resistance with them, and has it been a popular feature?
It's been a popular feature, and the publishers don't mind because they know that a professor and a student are not going to replace the textbook with Wikipedia. The Wikipedia goal, the whole premise behind Wikipedia is not to be a textbook; it's to be crowdsourced knowledge, and it is therefore not perfect. Textbooks themselves are not perfect either, but they're much closer to it because they're so well curated. So, people love the fact that they can type in a search phrase, and if they don't find exactly what they're looking for, they're just looking for a very quick response. They just want to know that the sort of the weight of the molecular weight of a given chemical compound. That's super easy to find on Wikipedia. You can type in calcium carbonate, and it'll look that up and show it to you on the spot, and you get your answer, and you hit done, and it takes you right back into the textbook without even leaving the application. And I think that's complementary to the textbook, not competitive, so that the textbook publishers don't mind, and I think users love it. We've seen them pick up on this feature pretty dramatically, actually, since we shipped 2.0.
Okay. So my last question has to do with platforms, and it's somewhat selfish, because I'm an iPhone and iPad guy today, but I'm about ready to jump ship over to the Android on both. And Inkling today is only available for the iPad. So is Android in your future?
Well, I'm curious to know which Android device you are going to jump to.
Yeah, so on the phone, I guess in a couple of weeks here, AT&T is coming out with the Galaxy S2 phone, I believe it is.
Uh-huh.
And I'm just totally drooling over that one. And then on the tablet, I'm waiting for this much rumored Kindle one that's supposed to come out in the next
Uh-huh.
month or two. So
Yeah,
that's the answer right there.
right on. So I think in the phone world, you've kind of hit the nail on the head with this. In the phone world, the Android devices are fantastic, and I think legitimately competitive with the iPhone. I think in the tablet world, there's nothing out there today that competes with the iPad. And I also have heard the rumors about Amazon, and I'll make no comment about products that don't exist yet. But I think for us, it's about being on the right platforms at the right time. And the right time to be on iPad today, the right time to be on iPad is today. And I think if there are compelling devices that are going to come out from these other vendors, including Amazon, then we're absolutely going to consider those platforms for Inkling. There's one platform today that really matters, and it's iPad. And so we make sure that we focus our limited resources on that one 97% market share or whatever it is device. And but it is important to know that all of the content that we build for Inkling is built in a platform independent file format, and therefore, when it's time for us to look at other platforms, the content that we have available today will instantly publish to those other platforms too.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Okay. Matt MacInnis, founder and CEO of Inkling, thank you so much.